Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7. My name is Patryk Witkowski and we are joined today by Maureen Watt. Lovely to have you again. Of
Great to see you too. Thank you for having me.
course, we look forward to your insight today. Our first story is the Middle East update, where at least 48,467 Palestinians have been killed and 111,913 injured in Gaza since the 7th of October 2025, according to the Gaza Health Authority. Palestinian news agency Wafa reports that in the past 24 hours, hospitals in Gaza have received 9 more bodies of those killed by Israeli forces. 5 of the bodies have been recovered, with 4 new deaths reported. Over the weekend, Israel said its plans to cut off any remaining electricity supplies to Gaza. In a video announcing the directive, Eli Cohen, Israel's energy minister, said that Israel would use, quote, all means available to ensure the return of all Israeli hostages, and Hamas would not remain in Gaza after the war. Hamas accused Israel of cheap and unacceptable blackmail. Hamas spokesperson said the group has softened its demands at the request of the mediators and Donald Trump's envoy, but said that Israel's decision to cut off electricity and talk about resuming the fighting constitute a threat to the hostages. Israel's mediating team was expected to travel to Qatar on Monday to continue fragile negotiations over the release of remaining hostages held in Gaza and the ceasefire with Hamas. Israel has announced that the position of official IDF spokesperson will be taken by the BG Effie Defrin, who will replace RR Adam Daniel Hagari following an orderly and professional transition. Syria's defense ministry has announced it has completely completed military operations to fight remnants of former ousted President Bashar al-Assad. Hassan Abdul Ghani, Syria's defense ministry spokesperson, said in a statement on social media that with the end of a military operation against remnants of public institutions were now able to resume their work and provide essential services, saying, we are paving the way for life to return to normal and for the consolidation of security and stability, Abdul Ghani said. Police have questioned the protester who has been repeatedly reading out the names of hostages held in Gaza by Hamas through a loudspeaker outside of a Knesset member's home in Tel Aviv. The Greek oil tanker Sunyan, which caught fire after being attacked by Yemen's Houthis on August of 2024, has been successfully towed for the Suez Canal as part of a recovery process and is bound for Greece. In Australia, federal police say a caravan with explosives found in Sydney that appeared to be part of a plot to launch an attack on the synagogue was a fake terrorism plot and never going to cause a mass casualty event. Maureen, passing over to you. What do you make of the developments for a Middle East story?
Yes, it's interesting that we're talking about the Middle East rather than just Gaza this evening because if I take the situation in Syria first, I personally thought that the uprising in part of Syria, which had previously been an Assad stronghold, was quite surprising. But obviously, it was dealt with pretty quickly by the new regime. And I just wonder if insurgencies might be a regular occurrence in Syria, as you know, we know that Assad has repeatedly gone to Russia, and clearly they're backing him. So I just wonder if this is, the kind of constant chaos that we expect from the Putin regime. In terms of Gaza, cutting off the electricity is absolutely awful. It's against all, um, decent practice in wars, and against human rights and international law. Whether it will be one of the many, will be on the list of the many things that are held against Netanyahu once the war is over and one begins to talk about war crimes. But it just seems, kind of one step towards peace and one step back. Interestingly, I did hear about some talk about elections in Gaza, and that would be interesting because, we would really find out whether the Palestinians, well, one, it's going to be really difficult to organize an election because Palestinians are so scattered, and, do they have to have an address? Or how does their electoral law work, if you like? But two, it'll be interesting to see whether the Palestinians still continue to back Hamas or a regime of the Palestinian government. So, that would be really interesting to follow.
Thank you, Maureen. Moving on to our Ukraine update, where we have day 1111 of a conflict. Top Ukrainian officials are in Saudi Arabia to meet the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other Trump aides who were departing for Jeddah on Sunday. Andriy Yermak, the head of Volodymyr Zelensky's Ukrainian presidential office, is leading the Kiev's delegation. President Zelensky is also in Saudi Arabia today to meet with its crown prince. Zelensky said Ukraine was fully committed to a constructive dialogue in Saudi Arabia, saying that realistic proposals are on the table. The key is to move quickly and effectively. In February, U.S. officials met about the war with Russian officials in Saudi Arabia without Ukrainian representatives present. Donald Trump said on Sunday that he expected good results from the talks. He told reporters that his administration had just about lifted an intelligence pause on Ukraine and was looking at a lot of things with respect to tariffs on Russia. Trump said he thought Ukraine would sign a minerals agreement with the U.S., saying, "I want them to want peace." A large warehouse was on fire in Russia's Samara region after a Ukrainian drone attack, Russian authorities said on Monday morning. Reports also emerged of an attack targeting the Novokuyevsk oil refinery, citing reports of drone flights and an explosion from the refinery's direction. President Zelensky said Russia had carried out hundreds of attacks against Ukrainians last week. About 1,200 guided aerial bombs, nearly 870 attack drones, and more than 80 missiles of different types had been used. There were reports of Russian special forces sneaking through a disused gas pipeline to attack Ukrainian units holding territory in Russia's Kursk region. Ukraine's military general staff confirmed on Saturday evening that Russia had sabotage and assault groups used the pipeline in a bid to gain a foothold outside of Sudzha. They were attacked with rockets and artillery after being very sorry. Thank you. After being detected in a timely manner, the enemy's losses in Sudzha are very high. On Sunday, Russia announced it had captured territory in Ukraine's Sumy region across the border from Kursk for the first time since 2022 in a cross-border offensive. Russia's defense ministry also said on Sunday that its troops had taken 4 villages north and northwest of Sudzha, the closest 12 kilometers from its center. The claim came a day after the reported Russian capture of 3 other villages near Sudzha. Ukrainian drones targeted oil infrastructure in southern and central Russia overnight into early Sunday, Russian officials have said. A drone struck an oil depot in Cheboksary, a Russian city in the Volga River, about 1,000 kilometers from the border, the local governor has stated. Footage online showed what appeared to be a fire at or near one of Russia's largest oil refineries in the southern city of Yerezian. On Sunday, France said that it would use profits from frozen Russian assets to finance an additional 195 million euros in arms for Ukraine, the latest in a series of military aid deliveries funded through the assets. In an interview with La Tribune Dimanche, a newspaper, French Foreign Minister Sébastien Lecornu said Paris would send more 155 millimeter artillery shells and glide bombs for the Mirage 2000 fighter jets it gave to Ukraine. Maureen, what are you making of the peace talks that are engaged in the Ukraine-Russia conflict and overall developments that are happening there?
Yeah, well, just going back to the previous story, again, it seems that the Middle East countries are stepping up in terms of holding peace talks between Israel and Hamas. And here again, we see another Israeli country hosting talks about Ukraine and Russia and the war in Ukraine. Interestingly, Zelensky is also on a trip to the Middle East, although he's not personally taking part in the talks at this stage, which is probably a good thing. Clearly, they're still at a very early stage. It was clear today that Zelensky was not letting Donald Trump get away with the fact that he said that Zelensky doesn't want peace. He said he's been talking about peace since day one. It depends, I suppose, who you listen to. Some people say that clearly Russia is winning the war, but clearly from what you've said, Patryk, Ukraine itself has been able to land a number of blows on strategic positions in Russia. So the war goes on while the talks go on, but I think it's absolutely awful and just unforgivable that Trump has left Ukraine unguarded in terms of intelligence and being able to defend itself against missile strikes. It's all right, very well to say that Europe has to step up, but it can't step up immediately. And just to withdraw cover, as I say, I think is absolutely unforgivable.
Thank you, Maureen. In our next story, casualties have been rescued from burning vessels after a collision between tanker and cargo ship. A collision between the MV Stena Immaculate oil tanker and the Portuguese flagged container ship Solong in the North Sea on March 10th of 2025 has prompted an emergency response. The incident, which occurred off the coast of East Yorkshire near the Humber estuary, caused multiple explosions and a fire on the Stena Immaculate. The tanker, anchored at the time, was carrying Jet A1 fuel, and fuel was reported to have been released during the collision. Despite the severity of the situation, all crew members from both vessels were accounted for, with one person being taken to hospital. HM Coast Guard, along with lifeboats from several coastal bases and a helicopter, coordinated the emergency operation. Firefighting efforts were launched to prevent further damage and contain any potential environmental impact. Greenpeace UK is closely monitoring the situation, though the extent of any environmental damage has yet to be determined. The professionalism in the Coast Guard and RNLI was pivotal in managing the crisis and ensuring the safety of those involved. The Marine Accident Investigation Branch, MAIB, has confirmed it will be investigating the cause of the collision. Authorities continue to assess the situation, particularly with regard to the pollution control, as they work to contain the aftermath of the incident. As the response unfolds, authorities remain focused on mitigating any environmental risks while ensuring the safety of those affected by the incident. Maureen, feel free to comment on this story.
Yes, well, thank goodness all the crew are safe and the person who's been slightly injured recovers quickly. That is the main thing. These things are pretty rare nowadays, and it seems odd that this happened, even although it was seemingly very foggy at the Humber estuary, which is a very busy shipping lane. at all times. So, um, you know, both vessels, I think, are on fire, and if it's polluting anyway, but if it's burning off fuel rather than the fuel spilling into the sea, it probably costs less long-term damage, but any fuel spillage is very bad news, as we know from previous disasters worldwide. But it seems to be under control, and lots of people and ships, standby vessels and others, seem to have gone to help in the rescue, which is great. It seems to have all worked pretty well so far.
Thank you. In our next story, business leaders call for urgent action on Scottish carbon capture project. Business leaders in Scotland have urged the UK government to prioritise the Acorn Carbon Capture and Storage CSS project in Aberdeenshire, calling for immediate action to secure the country's industrial future. In a letter to Chancellor Rachel Reeves, the group, which includes the CBI Prosper, Scottish Chambers of Commerce, and Sir Ian Wood, emphasised that without the Acorn project, Scotland's industries will struggle to decarbonise, putting jobs and investment at risk. The letter highlighted an economic study estimating the project would add 17.7 billion to the UK GDP by 2050, creating over 10,800 construction jobs and sustaining 4,700 long-term roles. They argue that fast-tracking Acorn would unlock the next phase of carbonisation for key sites like Grangemouth, which faces the threat of industrial decline without CCS. Acorn has faced delays despite its potential to be a transformative project for Scotland's economy. The UK government has already funded carbon capture projects in England, such as those in Merseyside and Teesside. However, the Scottish project was initially given reserve status in 2021 and has not received the necessary funding. This follows a history of broken promises dating back to 2005, when the UK government first pledged support for carbon capture in Scotland. In 2015, a £1 billion funding commitment for a similar project at Peterhead was withdrawn, and despite a 2023 visit by Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, little progress has been made. The UK government has indicated that it remains committed to the Acorn project, stating it has already received over £40 million for development. However, business leaders and Scottish politicians argue that further delays could damage Scotland's economy and hinder the country's progress towards net zero goals. Ahead of the UK spring budget on March 26, SNP representatives, including economy and energy spokesperson Dave Duggan, has called for the UK government to deliver on its promises and secure funding for Acorn. They stress that failure to act would harm Scotland's industrial future and economic growth. Maureen, if you could, talk to us about the importance of carbon capture and why is it that we're facing these hurdles in developing these projects?
Well, this is an absolute scandal of the Westminster government neglecting Scotland. The Acorn project has been on the go for ages, long before the ones on Teesside and Merseyside were even thought of. So it is a well-developed project, ready to go at any time when it gets the funding. And the fact that 40 million has been spent on it already is an absolute scandal of waste of money. That it hasn't been given the go-ahead to realise the potential that it can. Now, I know that there are people against carbon capture and storage, particularly the Greens, but I think in terms of practical environmental policies, this has got to go ahead. As you said, Patryk, I mean, the number of jobs it would create, 10,800, is a huge amount of jobs, and the type of jobs that are needed as we move away from oil and gas and into renewable jobs. The people working in the oil industry could well transition to jobs involved in carbon capture and storage. And although it has been the most developed of the projects, it's always been in lane 2 or phase 2 or whatever. but never given the go-ahead. And I think that this is just an example of Westminster neglecting Scotland and putting the two projects in Merseyside and Teesside before the one in Scotland because of the red wall seats and thinking about electoral successes rather than anything else. As I say, an absolute scandal.
And just for a little bit of clarification, when you mentioned that some green activists or green beliefs might be against carbon capture, is that just because it's sort of like an imperfect solution for fossil fuels, and these parties would prefer if that money was just used on green energy sources on its own, or how does that work?
To be honest, I'm not exactly sure what their argument against it is, but but um, if you think about it, the amount of carbon that is released by industry um, is is substantial, and if we're
Mm.
going um, to mitigate it for climate change reasons, um, that then it's really important that it goes ahead. I mean, if the Greens' reasoning is that it hasn't been tested, then that argument doesn't stand for Teesside and Merseyside because they're obviously going ahead. So, as I say, it really is a kick in the teeth, particularly to the northeast where people have spent years and years, I think you said since 2005, on
Right.
this project and have yet to see it come to fruition. So much as I might have disagreements sometimes with Ian Wood and the Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce, I see why they're continuing the pressure on this because at the moment things in the northeast and Scotland seem to be in a bit of a limbo in terms of, just continuing the march towards green energy, and this would be a real fillip if it was given the go-ahead.
Thank you, Maureen. In our next story, a report finds that businesses are holding back on hiring as they face significant cost rises. A new report from the KPMG and the Recruitment and Employment Confederation highlights a continued decline in hiring and a rise in unemployment, reflecting ongoing weakness in the UK economy. The report, covering February 2025, shows a marked reduction in the number of people being placed in both permanent and temporary roles, although the pace of decline slowed compared to January. The overall trend indicates a challenging labor market. The report also highlights rising unemployment as businesses brace for increases in labor costs, notably from the upcoming rise in employer national insurance contributions and the 6.7% increase in the minimum wage set for April. This decline in hiring and job losses is further compounded by a dip in business optimism. According to BDO, business confidence has fallen for the fifth consecutive month, reaching levels not seen since the aftermath of the global financial crisis. UK business output also shrank for the second consecutive month, in February, suggesting a slowdown in overall economic activity. Experts attribute part of the downturn to a combination of Brexit's ongoing impacts, threats of tariffs from former US President Donald Trump, and rising costs due to policy changes. Despite these challenges, some sectors, particularly services, have shown resilience, possibly due to the warmer weather and a continued shift in consumer spending patterns. The UK government's planned tax hikes are expected to increase costs for businesses, which could lead to further job cuts or price increases. By contrast, the Scottish government is pursuing a different approach, emphasizing investment in public services and tackling economic inequality as part of its economic strategy. However, it only has limited economic powers. Maureen, what do you make of this report?
Well, I think it's yet another one which highlights how counterproductive Rachel Reeves' budget is panning out, if you like, and we've not yet seen the increases in the minimum wage and in the national insurance contributions. Now, I agree wholeheartedly with increases in the minimum wage. I think everybody should be on the real living wage, and then obviously, depending on the type of job you're doing, increases from that, because otherwise it's a subsidy to businesses that haven't got, in my view, a decent business plan, which should be based on a business paying the real living wage, and making sure that it is environmentally sustainable. But that aside, so as I say, I think people who don't pay the real living wage and where their employees have to rely on universal credit, that is a subsidy to these businesses. But the effect of the increase in national insurance, I think, we are seeing companies hedging their bets to see just how their business pans out after April. And, you can totally understand businesses being cautious in this current climate. We don't know from one day to the next, never mind the long-term planning that businesses have to do, of the economic shocks that might come our way, whether it's tariffs or disruption to world trade, or whatever. So it'll be interesting to see how this pans out in the months after April.
Thank you. In our next story, charities warn that disability benefits would have devastating impact that cuts to disability benefits would have devastating impacts, pushing more people into poverty. 16 leading disability and welfare charities have expressed concern over proposed cuts to personal independence payments, warning that up to 700,000 disabled households could be pushed into poverty if the UK government moves forward with plans to reduce disability benefits by up to £5 billion. The open letter, signed by organisations including Scope, MenCap and Disability Rights UK, highlights the vital role that benefits like PIP play in supporting disabled individuals, enabling them to live independently and work where possible. The charities argue that cutting benefits would have a catastrophic impact, especially as disabled people already face higher living costs due to their condition. The letter stresses that while there is support for reforming the welfare system, cuts are not the answer and could worsen employment outcomes for disabled people. The UK government's proposed changes also include tougher tests for disability benefits, frozen payments in 2026, and changes to how universal credit is calculated. The SNP has strongly criticised these plans, accusing Labour of following the same austerity measures that negatively affect vulnerable groups. The SNP's Kirsty Blackman condemned the cuts as shameful and stated that they would disproportionately hurt disabled people, further exacerbating the financial challenges many already face. In contrast, the Scottish Government's approach offers a different model, with disabled people in Scotland receiving the Scottish Disability Payment. This payment is set to increase by 1.7% in April, though the potential for cuts in the UK's budget may affect Scotland's funding through reduction in the Barnett consequentials. This difference highlights the Scottish Government's focus on treating social security claimants with dignity and respect, as opposed to the punitive approach seen in some UK welfare policies. Maureen, are you also concerned about how these policies could be affected in Scotland due to the decisions made in Westminster?
I mean, it's just wearing that every single time that savings have to be made, the first port of call is those least able to look after themselves. I mean, Labour cannot say that they're a party and a government for all when they're targeting those least able to look after themselves. And the mental stress, never mind any other disabilities that people on disability benefits might have, is just incredible. I mean, do these people actually know anybody who's on benefits and know the stress that people are under? You have to fight for every single thing, whether it's carers coming in, whether it's a mobility car. It's just a fight all the time. And it's just, I mean, the government, it's awful to think that the Labour government, never mind the Tories before them, use the stick rather than the carrot. Cuts in disability benefits should only happen if people have not been given or have been given the support to move into work and have rejected it, in my view. And it should be over a long period of time, because if you've been unemployed for a long time, it is really difficult, really, really difficult to get back into work. And businesses businesses need the support to take on people, and charities. I know many charities that work in this field who help people, not just getting them into work, but help them through the first weeks and months and maybe even years to get established in a job, and work closely with the employee and the employer to make sure that that work is working for both parties. So this just seems, a sledgehammer to crack a nut, and going about it in totally the wrong way, in my view.
Thank you, Maureen. In our next story, the SNP confirms an appointment of the next chief executive. The SNP has appointed Carol Beattie as the party's permanent chief executive following a competitive recruitment process. The announcement was made today by SNP business convener Angela Constance. Carol Beattie, who served as the interim chief executive since October 2024, replaced Murray Foote following his resignation. Prior to this role, she was the chief executive of Stirling Council from 2019 to 2024. Ms. Constance emphasised that Beattie's appointment is crucial for the party's preparation for the 2026 election campaign and for advancing Scotland's independence movement. The SNP hope that Beattie's leadership will ensure the party remains well-equipped and focused on the challenges ahead. With a strong background in local government, Beattie is seen as pivotal in strengthening the party's organizational structure and maintaining its competitive edge as it heads into the next election cycle. Maureen, do you have a comment on Carol Beattie? Is this somebody that you got to work with? Is this somebody that you follow closely? What do you make of this appointment?
So I'm absolutely delighted that Carol has been appointed. I had heard that she wasn't going for the role, so I'm delighted that she's changed her mind. I did work with her in terms of the restructure of SNP HQ, and she, carried it out very professionally and with compassion and caring as well. So I think she's absolutely great for the role. She comes from a local government background, which is a totally different perspective from previous chief executives, apart from Murray Foote perhaps, who have, come through the ranks of the SNP, if you like. So I think it's great that she brings a different perspective. I think she will continue to build on the restructuring that has happened to make HQ there to work for members and to be election ready for 2026. And her commitment is really strong, because it's not that many months ago that she was a candidate herself, standing in a council by-election in Falkirk. So it's great news.
Thank you. In our next story, we shift our focus over to Canada, where Mark Carney is set to become the Canadian Prime Minister after winning the Liberal Party leadership. Mark Carney, former central banker, will become Canada's next Prime Minister after winning the federal Liberal Party leadership race. His victory comes amid rising tensions with the US, particularly over a trade war sparked by US President Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on Canadian goods. Carney, aged 59, who previously led the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, criticized Trump's actions and vowed to stand firm, stating that Canada would never be a part of America. He emphasized the importance of defending Canada's sovereignty, particularly with respect to the tariffs, which could push the US and Canadian economies into a recession. Outgoing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also addressed the situation, warning that this was a critical moment for the country's democracy and freedom, drawing on Canadian resilience to face external threats. Carney's win, with 85.9% of the vote, has energized the Liberal Party, reversing its political decline and raising the possibility of a snap election. His extensive economic experience, particularly in dealing with financial crises, makes him a key figure in managing the ongoing trade dispute with the US. Carney's leadership is seen as crucial in navigating Canada's current challenges, and the political shift is also seen as a response to the mounting pressure from Trump's aggressive rhetoric. Maureen, how do you think Carney's appointment impacts the political landscape in Canada, and do you imagine a snap election coming soon?
Yes, I think Mark Carney will want to put his own stamp on his own government, but I don't know if you saw his speech to the Liberal Party once the election was announced last night. It was really strong stuff. I mean, he won by a landslide against, the government's economic chancellor. His victory was overwhelming, but his speech was amazing. There was no kowtowing to Trump at all. He was, vowing to stand against Trump's and match him tariff for tariff, if you like. And there's no way that they're going to be the 51st state under Mark Carney. And I feel a bit sorry for Justin Trudeau, because it just shows you how quickly things change on the world stage. And, the Liberal Party's fortunes were on the slide. But now even Justin Trudeau left on a high compared to what had gone previously. And Mark Carney, as I say, I think will hold a fairly early election just to put his own stamp on things, to confirm his own leadership and his own government. Because even in the victory speech, he was veering slightly from what Trudeau has done in terms of some policies. So, watch this space. It's gloves off, I think, between Canada and the United States. Canada strong is their motto, and he certainly came out strongly.
Thank you, Maureen. That does sound exciting. We shift over to Poland, where the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has calls for respect between allies after Elon Musk suggests he would turn off Starlink in a social media post. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has called for greater respect among allies following a social media clash between Poland's Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski and US Senator Marco Rubio over the Starlink satellite service. The dispute began when Sikorski suggested that Ukraine might need an alternative to Starlink if its reliability became an issue. Poland funds Ukraine's use of Starlink, which provides critical internet connectivity for the country's military. Rubio responded by accusing Sikorski of spreading misinformation and downplaying Starlink's importance in Ukraine's defense. Sikorski reaffirmed the service's value, but emphasized Poland's concerns regarding its future reliability. Elon Musk, the owner of Starlink, also weighed in, telling Sikorski to, quote, "be quiet," and calling him a small man. Musk later backtracked on his threats that Starlink could be turned off in Ukraine. Donald Tusk, without directly naming anyone, posted on social media urging allies to show respect and avoid arrogance. The incident underscores ongoing tensions between the US, Poland, and the involvement of private companies in supporting Ukraine's war against Russia. Maureen, some pretty key concerns highlighted here. What do you make of this clash taking place on social media? To be one, I suppose, and two, should we be concerned about Starlink? Should we be concerned that internet connectivity is reliant on political forces within a separate country outside of your own?
Well, I think if you work for any of Elon Musk companies, and the day-to-day running of them while he's off cutting through his Doge department, key federal tasks, it must be a nightmare. You must be tearing your hair out because, these companies still have to survive. They probably, employ thousands of people, and yet with a childish post on social media, Elon Musk could, disrupt everything. My understanding is that Starlink, as you said, is financed by Poland and used by Ukraine. So it's kind of it's a private contract, if you like. It's got nothing to do with the US government per se. And yet he's trying to disrupt even that. Whether it's important, it seems to me to be very important. And as we started off this program with, cutting cover for Ukraine in any way, shape, or form is totally and utterly unacceptable.
Thank you, Maureen. Concerning stuff indeed. In our next story, we've got 500 days until the Glasgow 2026 Commonwealth Games. Today marks 500 days until the Commonwealth Games of 2026 beginning in Glasgow. First Minister John Swinney highlighted the significance of this milestone ahead of a Commonwealth Day service at Westminster Abbey. The Games will bring together athletes and para-athletes from 74 nations, with hundreds of thousands of visitors expected and a global audience of over 1 billion. The Scottish Government views Glasgow 2026 as a major opportunity to showcase Scotland on the world stage, emphasising the event's role in fostering connected communities, a theme highlighted during this year's Commonwealth Day. Glasgow's success in hosting major events, such as the 2014 Commonwealth Games, has earned international recognition, and the city is set to benefit again with upgrades to its sporting facilities. The Games are expected to generate significant economic benefits for the city and provide thousands of volunteering opportunities, offering participants skills development and health benefits. In addition to the economic impact, the Games aim to inspire the public to be more active, with many hoping the event will encourage people to try new sports or join local clubs, supporting the Scottish Government's vision of a more active Scotland. Maureen, are you feeling the excitement for the Commonwealth Games yourself?
I am actually. I went to a few things at the last Commonwealth Games. My daughter was a volunteer at the Athletes Village. Really hard work, but I think it really grabbed the nation, if you like. It was great weather, which made a big difference. And although this Games is going to be smaller, I think Scots will be really enthused about it and will support the events like they did last time. So I am enthusiastic about it. And the reason is that there are many countries who cannot afford to send delegations and big delegations to the Olympic Games. And the Commonwealth kind of steps in and allows their athletes to come to a smaller games. And I think it's very important. And I haven't listened to any coverage about Commonwealth Day today. But regardless of what you think about it in the past, the Commonwealth is really important in maintaining links with countries, on all continents, because if the West didn't, then you can bet your bottom dollar that China and or Russia would move in, and take over the influence in those countries. So I think the Commonwealth has got a big role to play on the world stage, given the upheaval that we're experiencing currently.
Thank you. And for our last story of the day, we've got Christina McKelvey to step down as MSP for the 2026 election. Christina McKelvey, MSP, has announced she will not seek re-election as the SNP candidate for Hamilton, Larkhall, and Stonehouse at the 2026 election, citing health reasons. Ms. McKelvey, who has represented the constituency for 18 years, expressed pride in her work supporting local communities and advancing causes such as Scottish independence and social justice. She highlighted key achievements, including the Hamilton Town Centre Regeneration Plan and efforts to combat fuel poverty through the Quick Credit Voucher Scheme. McKelvey also took action against proposals for an incinerator in Stonehouse and supported local groups like the Larkhall District Volunteer Group. As a backbench MSP, Christina McKelvey led significant initiatives, including Clare's Law, which allows disclosure of previous violent or abusive behaviors, and legislation on human trafficking. She later served as a minister, focusing on issues such as female genital mutilation, protection, and the launch of the world's first strategy to address social isolation and loneliness on health issues. Throughout her career, Miss McKelvey championed Scottish independence and the country's place within the European Union. In a personal reflection, Christina McKelvey shared her recent experience with breast cancer treatment, which led her to step back from her political career to prioritize her health and family. She expressed gratitude for the support of her family, constituents, and the SNP, and vowed to continue advocating for Scottish independence. Ms. McKelvey confirmed her commitment to supporting her successor in Hamilton, Larkhall, and Stonehouse. Maureen, do you have much to comment on Christina McKelvey? Are you sad to see her go? And is it too early to talk about who would be competing for this role or who would be standing in the SNP position in 2026?
Well, yes, that last comment, yeah, it's far too early to be talking about who might replace her. I consider Christina as a really close friend, and I'm really anxious about the fact that she's battling breast cancer again. She very bravely fought it off before, and it's such a shame that she has to stand down, or feels she has to stand down because of health reasons. You mentioned some of the things that she has been involved in, and Christina is known for her enthusiasm about so many things. I mean, she is such a bundle of activity. And, you mentioned many things in the area of social justice, human trafficking being one that she was really passionate about. But she was absolutely great as an older people's minister, and the number of old people's groups who really engaged with her when she went on visits was great to see. So I'm saddened that she's standing down, but I totally and utterly understand, and I'm with her 100% on putting her health and her family, including her new grandson Leo, first.
Of course. Thank you, Maureen. And that does conclude us for this evening of Scotland at 7. Before I go, I just want to remind you that at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of our supporters. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, thank you very much. We are £16,000 short of our funding requirements in 2024, which has left us short of the money we need to pay our bills. We face costs of over £4,000 every month, but only receive donations of around £2,500. We urgently need to raise at least £8,000 to pay our bills now. Our programs will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, and please donate whatever you can afford. Thanks again to Maureen Watt for giving us the evening of hers. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And with that, we bid you farewell, and we'll catch you in the next show.